Hello. Hello, my friends. Good to see you. It is 1 o'clock in the morning, California time, and it is whatever time it is, wherever you are, or whatever you think it is. That is also acceptable. We live in a world of choice, and if you want it to be a different time than what your clock says, it's okay with me. I am easy on that one. So, what is there? The cats are very busy tonight. Just to warn you, there's a great deal of running around and murphing and roaring and things like that. I don't know if they'll calm down now, just to make me look like I'm a excuse me, cat hair. I forgot to turn the air filter on. Just in case they decide to make me look like a complainer and then suddenly go all quiet and cute and well behaved and, the thing that animals do sometimes. And children also, when they want to embarrass you in front of your friends or whatever, it's like show them that cute thing you did earlier. That children and animals. W.C. Fields was absolutely right. Now there's PJ back there. Never work with children or animals. That's why I don't include them as part of my show. If they happen to wander through, I can't do much about it since we're all trapped down here together. But I would never try to actually get them to participate in any useful way because children and animals. So anyway, nice to see you. Nice to be with you. It is very, very early Sunday morning here. And I am still pretty much in the same mode. I'm this close to finishing the Ordinary Farm first draft after many distractions. I told somebody last spring that I was going to deliver it by July. And obviously I missed that deadline a little bit. But then again, this book is already like 12 years overdue. So it's not like anybody is seriously waiting for it, that can't wait a little bit longer. I have very little control over the publishing schedule. I have very little control over my life, which is why things like this happen. And the last couple, 2-3 years, mostly the last two, have just been hellacious on schedules and things like that. But anyway, no complaints, just facts. So what else was I going to talk about? So that's done. Oh, I've just remembered something else I'm supposed to be doing and I haven't done. The Office we started on a little bit. You can actually probably tell if you've watched enough of these since we've been back that there's actually some surfaces where there didn't used to be surfaces and some of the boxes aren't piled that high. It's just the beginning because there's still a lot of complicated stuff to be done before this can all be cleared out, but it will be done. And we will have some kind of nicer backdrop for you. Or perhaps I'll put both cats in a big plastic bag and you can just watch them all the time. I might even hang it in front of the camera so that you'd have something more interesting to watch than me. What else before I go and see who's checked in? I think I said something in the little titles that I have to put on these things each time. That, among other things, there would be apologies. It's not an apology in the normal sense, but I thought it might be useful to explain a few things to people. Mostly for those who are concerned or interested in I'm not even sure this is a word, but the canonicity of anything I'm doing here online or elsewhere. I've told people in the past, and I've told many of you folks who've tuned in for these readings, that, please don't ever feel bad about pronouncing my characters' names and worrying if they're wrong or they're right, because I pronounce some of them wrong. I've mentioned this before because the characters, some of the characters were named before I knew where their names came from, back when I was a less obsessive compulsive writer. And, I gave them the names and then only later figured out that was probably not the best pronunciation. And in some of these cases, I kind of tried to invent after the fact things that would explain. But, so that I've told you about before. What I wanted to talk about this time in terms of the canon. So there is no canon for how to correctly pronounce the names. Similarly, the fact that when I'm reading, I am giving these characters different, well, not accents per se. I think the technical term would be dialects, since most of this is in English, and I'm reading it in English. And so the differences within languages are usually referred to as dialects, pronunciation differences in languages. I believe, my understanding is that they are considered dialects, whereas an accent is actually what you have when you are speaking someone else's language that is not your native language, or at least is not your first language. Well, I guess that is your native language. Anyway, so the thing that I wanted to talk about is similarly in something not being canon. Please do not assume that because I am giving people certain dialects, or I'll probably wind up saying accents anyway just because it's simpler, because I'm giving characters certain dialects or, things like that, even some of the ones who are, not even quote unquote foreign, but I'm giving them a certain kind of way of talking. This is by no means meant to be like the official, that's actually how they talk. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Jumping back a little bit, I have said in the past also, although I don't think I've said it as part of these readings, but I might be wrong, that when I originally created Ostenard and created all these, the countries, the parts of it, that the polities, to use a nice fancy word, that the world is divided into, I gave them certain fairly distinct connections to real world types of places and historical situations and civilizations. So, Naban is obviously sort of similar to classical Rome and its medieval successor. The Hernistiri, or people of Hernistir, are Celtic or Gaelic in many ways. At least the names and the languages are. Certain aspects of the cultures also. Same thing with the folks of Rimmersgard, which is in part kind of Icelandic, but also there are differences obviously too in terms of the fact that these people are not seafarers, that they kind of historically gave up seafaring except for a small group of them along the coast. And so as I've said in the past in various readings and stuff like this, I did not pick those things because I was trying to say this is exactly who these people are. These people are exactly like Celts, and these people are exactly like Scandinavians or Icelanders or whatever. But I picked them because I knew it was going to be a really complicated book with a ton of different names. This is even when I was starting out, when I was just first realizing the horror that I was about to inflict on the world in terms of large books with huge casts. And as a result, I wanted to give people a quick cue as to where these characters were from. And I figured if I modeled the names and the languages on actual languages and things like that, and some cultural aspects as well, it would make it easier for people to see a name and go, well, that name looks kind of Celtic or kind of Gaelic. Therefore, these people must be from Hernistir, and I already know a little bit about that. And similarly with the other kinds of places. And there are also a few little linguistic clues that are sprinkled in there. For instance, that the Thriving's language is based on the Anglo-Saxon, that the place names and many of the people names of the Erkenlanders, that's kind of based. The Erkenlanders are kind of based on Anglo-Saxon, and the Thriving's people are. The language is similar, but there have been various consonant shifts and other things like that. And that was just a little kind of clue that I put in there, that there was a relationship, that these people at one time had a common language. But as I said, I've already said this before, so that is not what I'm here to apologize about. But I did want to make clear that some of these things are not quite as simplistic as they appear, and that there are reasons for these things, many of them having to do with my trying to make the books more readable when I was starting out. And then, of course, I'm locked in. 30 years and more later, I'm locked into these things. What I wanted to kind of apologize for was, again, I don't want anybody to think that the voices that I'm giving to the characters are somehow meant to be canon, because they are not at all. And there's several reasons for this. One of them is because I'm not that talented an actor. I cannot simply call up picture perfect dialects out of my mind on the spur of the moment. And in fact, oftentimes, the spur of the moment is just that. It's the spur of the moment. If I was reading this stuff as an audiobook, for instance, I would put in a lot of time ahead of time and work on different dialects and different characters' way of speaking so that I had them down and figured out. For these readings, whatever I'm reading, it's probably the first time that I've looked at it since I wrote it. So the books with a whole lot of characters, I'm literally sometimes, like, my eyes are scanning ahead going, I think there's a new character coming in. Which one is it? Who is it? Do I remember who it is? Do I know anything about what they're like? And how are they going to talk? And I'm literally making those decisions as I'm reading. Now, I don't mean this as an excuse for bad work. I'm still doing my best to be consistent, and I'm doing my best to, at least in that broad way I was talking about with the names and nationalities, I'm doing my best to give the characters some kind of commonality, because of their national origin and the fact that they're all speaking the same language, just as I'm reading everything in English, or if you're reading the German editions or the Dutch editions or the Spanish editions or whatever, you're reading them in your own language too, but you're reading them in one language. But so as a result of all of this, I don't have a plan. I'm literally just making it up as I go along. And that's fine. I wouldn't be able to do this stuff if I had to sit down and research all this stuff. I just wouldn't have time. But it does mean I want you to understand, those of you who care about such things, which is probably not most people, but for those of you who do care about such things, these language, dialect, accent things are not meant to be definitive. The only thing that I'm really bringing to this that is not canon, but is closer to being some kind of canon, is that to the extent I can see where things are going, I'm trying to give them the pacing and weight, and sometimes the sort of direction that I intended when I wrote them. So I'm trying to, when somebody is saying something in a slightly sarcastic manner, I am trying to do the voice sounding slightly sarcastic, because I want that to come through. I want that to be alive. But anything else beyond that, and especially in terms of me doing, cod Irish accents or cod British accents or anything like that, I know these are not very convincing. I realize that. But as with the names and the places and the bits of language from the other cultures, I'm doing them just to make it easier for people to grasp that different characters are talking and not to have to figure out which character is saying what all the time, so that you can listen to it as a story that's happening as you're listening, instead of puzzling about who said this, which is, if I just read it all in the same voice in a kind of, narrator style, I don't think it would be as easy to follow. So that's just my little mea culpa. It's been a long time since I have done any acting, and I'm just doing it on the fly. So please don't ever go, oh, so-and-so is supposed to sound like that. No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. I'm mostly doing it to make things as clear as possible as to who's talking and things like that. Anyway, okay, was there anything else I wanted to say about that? No, I think that's the general thing. But so it's a bit of an apology. I know this is not the best possible voice work or voice acting that I could be doing. And so I'm apologizing for that and telling you, don't take it super, super seriously. Okay, just to the extent that you can enjoy it, even with me doing silly accents. Please try. I'm mostly doing it to just try and mark out which characters are which. And oftentimes literally making it up at the moment when I suddenly go, oh my God, wait, this guy is from such and such a place. I'd better give him some kind of an accent. So anyway, now let me go check in and see if people are in before I start reading. But that page, of course, the content is not there. Okay. Suzanne's trying to say, I don't think any of us are taking you seriously. And that's grand. As you can tell, I am not, I've never considered myself to be the world's most, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, wait. Why is this saying that this video has ended? Why is that? Okay, hang on. Let me check this on another channel. No, it's nothing I did. Okay, let's have a look here and see what we've got. Sorry, no, it's live on the other channel. Anyway, alrighty. So, no, we seem to be still on board and everything is going the way it's supposed to go, and that one's keeping track of comments. So, you know, although again, it's just a list. It doesn't actually let me see the comments because that would be too easy. And no, it's not even letting me see the list right now. So I can't say hello to anybody except the 3 or 4 people who are on the comments on the top page. Chris and James and what the hell is it? Oh, and we've got some kind of piece of spam here from somebody sending everybody on the list a strong connection. Feeling a strong connection concerning their relationship and general life. Can you message me for your reading, my beloved? Somebody is a psychic, and somebody is spamming our comments, but I don't think that's the reason I can't see the comments. I think that's just the fact that Facebook wants to kill me. I don't know why. Anyway, so I'm glad you're all there. I have no idea who it is because, again, Facebook, every time I press the thing for comments where it usually at least lists who has commented, I'm getting a little spinning wheel. And frankly, I'm so frustrated with that part of Facebook. I cannot even express it. But I'm not going to spend all my time worrying about it. So what I'm going to do instead is start working. So enough babbling about accents and blah, blah, blah and all that stuff. Let me just read things. Okay, so Simon is musing about various things while he's waiting for, I believe, Pasavales. And no, Pasavales is already there, and they've been having a conversation, and Pasavales is having Simon sign important royal papers. So that's where we are. And Simon is kind of thinking about things to himself, and he's wondering, as I recall, yeah, okay. Simon was trying to talk to that's what it was. Simon was trying to talk to Pasavales about getting married, saying Tiamat didn't get married until he was old. You can get married if you want to, you know, because Pasavales is saying, no, I'm too busy, you know, my work is my mistress, etc., things like that. So I'm going to start reading about a couple of paragraphs back from where we ended. There's no shame to waiting, Simon said hurriedly. Don't get me wrong, dear old Tiamat is older than I am, and he married only a few years ago. He's as happy as can be. Lady Delia is a fine woman. She is. But Simon was a bit confused now. Had he offended his Lord Chancellor? He hadn't meant to. Perhaps Pasavales was one of those men who didn't like women. Simon had always found the idea strange himself, but it seemed too commonplace to be merely sin. God had made all kinds of people upon his earth, from Simon's old harper Sangfugal, who even in his old age had still had an eye for attractive young men as well as women, to those like Archbishop Jervis, whom Simon had once seen walk past a drunk, half-naked woman without even noticing her as she lay singing on her back in Market Square. Despite his own marriage and his still powerful desire for his wife, the dark secrets of the bedchamber often confused Simon. If God had meant the act to be only between married men and women, why did he fill the world with so many temptations? Why did he make the desire so strong and the act so pleasurable? I am sorry, Majesty. I have distracted you from your thoughts, Pasquale said. Please just fix your seal on these last few, and I will leave you in peace. No, I was wool gathering, Simon said, dripping wax on the last document. But this talk of ours has put me in mind of another thing I would discuss with you. This visit from the legate. I have made the arrangements, sire. The only question remaining is whether he should stay here in the Hayholt or at St. Suchan's, which is the usual place for important religious visitors. I feel no strong urge to put him up in the castle, Simon said. But it is not the arrangements I want to discuss, it's the thing itself. Sire, the thing itself, the wedding of the Duke's brother Drusus. You have heard that the lector is requesting the Queen and myself attend, and then use the opportunity to force the two arguing sides to make peace. You are from Naban, and you know the southern mind better than I do. What do you think? Pasquale stood, his arms now full of vellum rolls with dangling seals. Well, Majesty, he began. Oh, sit down, man, before you drop everything, Simon said, pointing to a bench. I want your thoughts. Once seated, Pasquale was quiet for some time, considering. At last he stirred and said, If I may be perfectly truthful, my king, I think you should go. Both of you. Really? Simon was pleased, but he wanted something more he could offer to Miriamel, because he knew she thought it a bad idea. Why? Because this is no mere feud between families, though feuds are nearly as common in Naban as an afternoon meal. It stems from a real problem, but there is another cause too. What is this real problem, do you think? For years now, the northern and eastern lords of Naban have been pushing into the grasslands, building castles and settlements in lands the horsemen have always thought theirs. The thriving folk, as you know, sire, are a disorganized rabble, each band with its petty chieftain and even the most powerful chief that they have, Ruder Redbeard, is only Marchthane of the Meadow thriving and cannot call all the clans to war. But still there are many of them, many thousands of armed men who are raised to fight. In the past, most of their fighting has been against each other. Now they perceive two common enemies, Naban and Erkinland. Erkinland? Simon was startled. What have we done to them? Nothing like what the Nabanai are doing, but the Grasslanders have a long memory, and they are still angry about the last war they fought against us, despite it being one of their own who roused them to violence and led them into defeat. We also share a long border with their lands, and many new settlements have been built along the river road as far west as Gadrinset, the town that grew from a camp where Prince Joshua fought against his brother, King Elias. Still, there has been very little fighting in the High Thriving lately, Lord Chancellor. We have kept a close watch on those towns for exactly that reason, so as not to follow the bad example of Naban. True, Majesty, but the horsemen have trouble distinguishing between the Nabana nobles and the high throne here in Erkenland that permits those nobles to encroach on Thriving's land. He raised both his hands at Simon's outraged expression. I do not say it is true, Majesty, simply what I fear the Grasslanders believe. The Chancellor leaned forward, his face serious. I know these people, my king. I grew up on the verges of the Lake Thrivings. They are a fierce folk, and they not only nurse grudges, they pass them down from generation to generation. If nothing is done, one day another leader will rise among them, and there will be bloodshed all along the border. Not skirmishes, but all-consuming war. I am sad to say it, but I believe it is true. Good God, man. Good God. Simon was shaken. But what does all this have to do with that damnable wedding? It is the greatest issue dividing the two sides in Naban. Most of Dallo Ingadarus's followers are Eastern lords. They fear the Thrivingsmen, despite the fact that it is they themselves who have angered the horsemen. They want to punish the Grasslanders so fiercely that they will give up their raids entirely. But Duke Sayuceris is of a more careful mind. So the Stormbirds, Dallo's faction, call him a coward who will not defend his own people. Thus, any end to the struggle between the two factions will require some solution to the towns and great houses being built on Thriving's territory. Good God, said Simon again. Now that is a poser. But I think you said there was something else at work as well, or have I misunderstood? No, sire, you are right. And it is this. Drusus is a leader who is loved and respected by his men because he is fierce. He plays on the fears of the Easterners who live near the threatening horsemen. Or perhaps he truly believes it all himself. I could not say. But I think that those who lived through the days of the Storm King's War can appreciate exactly what the problem is between him and his brother. Simon was a little confused again. Which is? Which is that although the younger brother Drusus is bold, resolute, and never lets himself be distracted by complication of any kind, Duke Sayuceris is the opposite. A man who would rather give something to everyone to keep the peace, and who will not stoop to lying for advantage. Pasavales gave the king a significant look. Does that remind you of any two brothers you have known? Simon nodded. Of course, our own King Elias and Prince Joshua. Exactly, Majesty. Now imagine that Joshua had been born a year earlier and was raised to the throne, while your wife's father had been given little of importance to occupy himself and his vaunting ambition. What do you think would have happened then if Joshua had been the older and Elias the younger? That is what is at the root of Naban's problems. The brother who most think should have been the Duke is not the Duke. Simon sat back overwhelmed. I have not thought of it in this way before, Pasavales. I thank you. You think the Queen and I should attend this wedding. But I do not want my wife endangered. You make it sound like Naban is little better than the Thrivings these days. It will take the full prestige of the High Throne and the High Ward, I think, to solve this problem. Pasavales stood. I beg pardon if I have been too forthright in my talk, but you asked to know my thoughts. Matters in Naban are more delicate than they have been since the Storm King's War. The High Throne must take the lead, I believe, if only to remind the Nabani that they are part of a larger kingdom. He bowed. Forgive me for taking so much of your time, Majesty. If you will excuse me, I must get these letters back to the Chancellery so they can be dispatched. Pasquale backed up several paces before turning, always the correct courtier even in such an informal situation. After he had gone, Simon could only sit, staring at his royal seal and the stick of wax, wondering whether he and Miri were to spend the rest of their lives trying to prevent fools from harming themselves and others, and never to have a little peace for themselves. Chapter 45, A Nighttime Sun. Cat hairs. Chapter 45, A Nighttime Sun. Jacquard sucked the rest of the meat off the haunch, then threw the rabbit bones into the fire, where they popped and sizzled as the marrow boiled. Before they got too hot, he plucked them out with calloused fingers and snapped the bones in half, then sucked out the contents. He wiped his forearm against his mouth, leaving a trail of grease through his beard, and made a noise of satisfaction. "Are you finished with your meal, stepfather, or do I interrupt you?" Jacquard flinched and nearly fell off the bottom step of his new wagon. He had not noticed the tall shadow looming only a short distance away. "By the piercer, how long have you been standing there? And where have you been? I thought you had left for good, all these days missing." "Today I have been to a wedding," his stepson said. "I did not see you there." "Ah! May the gods curse it, is today the day? Drojan's wedding? No one sent for me." Jacquard was clearly ill at ease, and still did not look up to meet the younger man's eye. "Ah, hell's stripes on them all. How was the food? Was the food good?" "I left before the feast." Something in the younger man's tone finally made Jacquard look up. "Well, don't expect to share any food of mine, because it's all gone." His eyes narrowed. "What have you been doing? Your clothes are covered in dirt. Is that blood?" "It could be. I was in a fight." Unver came forward into the full light of the fire. The sun had all but sunk in the west, and the sky was striped with purple and red. "But I do not come here for food, stepfather. I come here for answers." The older man half rose, putting one hand behind him for balance. "Answers? What do you mean? How dare you strut in after all these days missing and talk to me this way?" A brief flash of firelight on metal, then the point of Unver's long knife was against his neck, pushing until Jacquard gasped in pain and terror. "Were you going to go inside your nice new wagon and lock the door against me? Do you really think that would stop me?" "Well, what are you doing? Have you gone mad? I am your father." "No, you are my stepfather, and a poor one at that. Where did this wagon come from, old man? I think Odrig sold it to you. Am I right?" Yes. Why do you act this way? He sold it to me for some horses." "But those horses were mine, old man." "They were in my paddock. That makes them mine." Jacquard let out a sudden screech as the knife poked deeper into the wattle of flesh beneath his beard. "What do you want?" "I told you. Answers." Unver sank down onto the steps. "Where do I come from?" "What nonsense is this? I told you." "You told me I came from a clan far away across the grasslands." "You did." "Tell me their name." The old man gasped in pain as the blade prodded him. "I do not remember. No, wait. It was one of the clans from the High Thrivings. They sent you to us." "You told me my father and mother were both dead. Is that true?" Of course." "Think And answer carefully, man. It may be your final act. The deadness in Unver's words seemed to frighten the old man more than the blade. Jacquard's staring eyes showed a great deal of white. Perhaps I misunderstood. It was such a long time ago. He could not bear to look at Unver's face. Your mother might have been alive. Yes, perhaps that was how it went. But your stepmother was so pleased to have you. Yes, that's it, I remember now. We told you your mother was dead, but it was the Thane's orders. Thane Hervold would not have ordered such a thing. He was a good man before his wits were taken. It is the truth. I swear it, Sanver. Do not call me that name. He said it with such violence that the old man broke free and threw himself off the wagon steps and onto his knees. That was the name my stepmother gave me, not you. After she died, you never spoke it once. You called me Unver, just like all the others. Nobody. Oh, by the spirits, what do you want? What do you want from me? I want as much truth as you know, old man. How did I come to the Crane clan? Tell me all you know, or I will slit you and bleed you like an old sheep. Do not hurt me. If you do not care for me, think of the others in the clan. If you spill my blood, they will shun you. Unver laughed. It was sudden and loud, ragged as an unclean wound. Will they? Do you know what I have done today, old man? Stupid, selfish, lying old man. I have gone to a wedding, and I have killed the bridegroom. This here is his blood. At least so I believe. He plucked at his tattered, stained shirt. You killed Drojan? The old man looked up from his knees, his terror even greater. By all the gods, what have you done? Odrig will have your head. I think not. Again that terrible laugh, softer now, but no less raw. You see, I killed Odrig too. I turned the wedding into a funeral, and I buried the bride as well, but her death was none of mine. Jacquard began to weep. It was clear he believed every word. Oh gods, what will we do? What will I do? You madman, you have destroyed us. There is no us, not since my stepmother died. You made that clear to me time and again. When you made me beg to be fed, when you gave me all the work you did not wish to do yourself, when you mocked me with the name the others had put on me, nobody. Now, if you do not wish to suffer a slower and more painful death than Thane Odrig, you'll tell me everything you know about my true clan. And stop your blubbering, or I will cut off your lips, and you will tell me your secrets with a bloody mouth. It took a long time, because the old man could not stop crying and lamenting his unfair fate, but at last Unver had the story from him, word by ugly, weeping word. When he had finally finished, the old man lay on his back like a whipped dog. There were thin cuts on his cheeks and his hands, but no mortal wounds. I have told you all I know, he sobbed. Please, son, do not kill me. Take Deafall and go. See, I did not sell him. I knew that if you returned, you would want him. He is in the paddock. The younger man frowned. For the last time, do not call me son. I am no son of yours. He snorted and stood up. Kill you? I have killed 2 men today. Why should I waste my blade on a sniveling creature like you? For my stepmother's sake, I will let you live, so that you may remember your shame. I hope it burns you, old man." "Oh, may the sky piercer bless you," the old man said, and would have said more, but he was silenced by a kick in the ribs. "But before I go, I wish to see your fine new wagon that you bought with my hard work, with my horses that would have been Culva's bride price." He bent and took a burning brand from the fire, then walked the length of the wagon, examining the cunning fittings of leather and metal and painted wood. Then he went up the steps and stepped inside. "7 horses this cost you," he called. "Truly?" Jacquard was on his hands and knees now, trying to get to his feet, puffing and gasping from the ache in his chest. "It is a fine wagon," he bawled. "Audra gave me an excellent price." Unver appeared in the doorway. "I think he cheated you." He came down the steps and dropped the brand back into the fire pit. Unver, cheated? The old man was still struggling, but at last he managed to rise. Thin streams of blood had run down his cheeks and into his beard, giving him the look of a painted clan shaman. It is a fine wagon. Audrig's second best. How can you say I was cheated? What is wrong with it?" "For one thing," Unver said with a hard smile, "someone seems to have set it on fire." As Unver walked away toward the paddock, the old man screeched helplessly at the evening sky, calling for help. Flames were just beginning to lick at the windows and their carefully painted trim. By the time Unver saddled his horse and rode away, the wagon had become a ball of bright fire, visible from a great distance away like a nighttime sun. Next section. She went out the southern door of the Sansellin Mahestrevis. It was the least used, but guarded as closely as all the others. Jeza nodded politely as the guards called to her, but she did not find their attention flattering, only confusing. Did they not know who she was? Did they think that the Duchess's own nurse had time for flirting with soldiers, even if she wanted to? She was not even dressed to please, her hair pulled tight and wrapped in a headscarf, her dress covered with an old cloak. Most men are fools, she thought. Time was pressing, so she made her way quickly through the farmer's market of the old city to the spice market and bought cinnamon, nutmeg, and harcha pepper, paying with the silver coin her mistress had given her. As she went with her bag from merchant to merchant, Jeza kept a close watch for anyone following her, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. The market was full of the usual morning buyers, many of them servants of great houses like herself, although none from any greater house, she thought with pride, since there was no house in Naban above the Sansellin Mahestrevis, except perhaps the Sansellin Aedonitis, the palace of his sacredness the lector. When she felt confident that she was not being watched, she left the market and walked quickly down Harbor Way toward the docks, through the wide commons and into the Avenue of the Saints, as most called it, since the great entrance arch bore statues of several important religious figures. She only knew Saint Polyppa, the one who had given the dying Eucyres a drink of water from her bowl, and although the saints of Naban were not hers, Jeza respected Polyppa as a woman who, for once, had been given praise for doing a woman's thankless job. The Avenue of the Saints was a wide, winding road that led up from the quarter, curving around Estranine Hill until it reached the large residences at the top, mostly owned by foreigners, rich merchants and rich nobles who liked to keep a place in the city. The greatest city in all the world, as Duke Saluceris liked to say. Jeza did not doubt it was true, at least in terms of size. Everywhere she went, the roads were crowded, not just with folk going about their business, although there were plenty of those, but with others who never seemed to leave the streets at all, hawkers, layabouts, and even women who Jeza felt rather certain were the ones Canthia had told her about. those who had fallen so far from God, as the Duchess explained, that they had to sell their samuli, as Jeza's people named them, their delicate flowers, for money. And although today everything seemed ordinary enough, even in this wealthy neighborhood she saw signs of the trouble that had beset the city lately, the riots in which she herself had nearly died. Crude pictures of white-winged birds and the motto, Secundus primus adis, the second shall be first, had been painted on the walls of several buildings, symbols of the storm birds, the men who supported the Duke's enemies, Dallo and Gadarus, and the Duke's own brother, Drusus. At the poorer end of the street, near the public market, she could even see the ruins of several houses that had been set afire. She shivered as she passed one, the blackened spaces of its windows like ghostly eyes. When she reached the middle of the hill, she looked back once more to make sure she was not being followed, then turned and walked quickly through the gate and into the ill-tended courtyard of a tall house. At the back of the courtyard, she knocked on a heavy wooden door. A servant opened the slot and asked her business. Jeza whispered Duchess Canthia's name and was quickly admitted. If the outside of the house had been disappointing for the dwelling of a man as rich as Viscount Matreu, the inside was not. Candles burned everywhere, and tapestries of many colors hung on the walls, some stitched with bright golden wire, but she had little time to admire them as she passed. The servant silently led her upstairs to an antechamber furnished with thick, low couches and equally low tables, and lit by several oil lamps. This room also was too thickly draped with fine tapestries to examine them all, but one in particular caught her attention. After the servant left, she walked closer to examine it. Jeza had never seen anything quite like it. The design was of a male human figure wearing a crown, but the figure had the tail of a whalefish, or so she assumed, having seen such things only in pictures. The crowned man's hands were spread wide over what looked like mountains, but much of his vast body seemed to be floating in the ocean, with tiny ships surrounding him on all sides. Surely this must be a picture of Osiris, the Adon, Jeza thought, the great god of Naban, although she had never seen him portrayed in such a way. The strangest thing about the hanging, though, was the material itself. It was not stitchery that made the picture, but rather tiny little shining plates glued one beside the other, like the beautiful mosaics on some of the floors of the Sancellan Mahastrevis. None of the shiny bits was much larger than baby Saracina's fingernails. As Jeza moved, they caught the light and seemed to flicker and move as if the crowned man with the tail was truly alive and watching her. This made her fearful, so she made the sign of the tree, although it still felt strange and false to do it. Still, in a foreign land there were foreign gods and demons that needed to be appeased, and Jeza was a practical young woman. "I see you are admiring the picture," a voice said behind her. Jeza was as startled as if she had been caught stealing. She turned to see Viscount Matreu standing in the doorway. He wore a long housecoat, with what she thought might be the bottom of a nightdress showing above his hose, and leather slippers. "I beg your pardon, my lord," she said. "Why, do you not like it?" He moved forward, smiling. "Oh, no, I think it is very good done. No, done very good." She spread her hands helplessly, thwarted by words. "Beautiful." "Yes, it is, I think. It was made by a great artist, one of the last on all of Spenit Island, who practices the skill. Do you see the small pieces? Those are fish scales. We have many, many colors of fish in our waters." He moved up beside her and examined the strange image. "Do you know who is pictured there? That is the great Lord Nuani, the old god of the sea. The islands bowed to Osiris long ago,
but my people still have a great affection for him. They call him Ocean Father and still sacrifice to him before beginning a long voyage." He saw her look and laughed. Fear not. The sacrifice is not a person, only a bit of fruit or some pretty polished stones." He kept his eyes on her face. "Do I not know you? What is your name?" "Jeza, my lord. I am the nurse to the Duchess Cantia, to her child." "Of course. You were in the carriage in St. Lavenin Square the other day. That was a terrible thing. I'm glad I was able to bring the Duchess out safely with her child. And you too, of course." "Thank you, my lord. We owe you very much." "I could have done nothing else. But as we speak of your mistress, I believe you have brought something for me." "Oh!" Jeza had been so taken by being once again in the presence of this handsome, dark man. Despite his size, he was so much like the men of her own tribe, at least to look at, that she had nearly forgotten. She hoped her shame did not show on her face. Yes, my lord. Yes, of course." She reached into the bosom of her dress and pulled it out, embarrassed to hand it to him with the warmth of her body still on the roll of parchment. "My mistress sends this to you and asks you for the kindness of a reply." He smiled as he took it, as an adult to a charming child. "Does she want my reply now?" "Yes, please, my lord, if you may please and do so." "Very well. You must give me a little time then." He gestured to one of the low couches. "Please sit while I attend to your mistress's letter." Jeza sat and did her best to look as though she did this sort of thing every day, entering the house of a wealthy nobleman without a chaperone, bearing messages from the Duchess of Aldebaran, but in truth she was flustered and more than a little frightened. She had no idea what the note said. She would no more have tried to read it than she would have intentionally harmed little Saracina. But since she did not know what it contained, she had no idea how the Viscount would react. What if what the Duchess had written made him angry? What if he beat her or forbade her to leave? "Courage, woman," she told herself. "Remember the green honey bird. Your mistress, the Duchess, honored you with this important task. Be a brave soldier for her." She took a deep breath and forced herself to get up and move around. The room was full of odd, interesting objects, but suddenly she was afraid to be so far from the Sancellan Mahestrevis and all that was familiar. Strange when she was already so far from her true home. Jeza was staring at a scowling wooden mask when the Viscount said, "A fierce fellow, eh? That is the mountain demon. In the high hills of Spenit, they still dance the story of how he stole the maiden, the chief's daughter, and how brave Wing defeated him and brought her back to her people. It reminds me of something back home," Jeza said, then had to repeat herself because she had spoken too softly. "They wear masks like this for the homecoming boats festival in the Ran." "Ah, is that where you are from? I wondered. You almost look like the hill people on my island." He looked up from his writing desk and smiled. "Have you ever been to Spenit?" "No, my lord. I have come to Quanitopul only before I came to Naban." "Then this must all be very strange to you. Even growing up in the Honza Spenitis, I found Naban disturbing on my first visit. So loud, so many people." "Yes, lord, very loud people." "Very loud people indeed. I hope you are never subjected to a meeting of the Dominiate. They screech at each other like the birds they wear." She could not help laughing. She had sometimes thought the same thing herself, that the shouting and arguing of these people seemed like harbor birds fighting over fish guts on the dock. Viscount Matreu
dripped wax, then applied his seal. After he had blotted it, he rolled up the letter. Halfway back across the room, he stopped and looked Jeza up and down. She felt her face grow hot. What did he want? What was he thinking? You are a beautiful young woman, Jeza of the Rhine. It would do my heart good to see a woman like you as part of this household, instead of the pinched, pale faces of my other servants. Do you think I could hire you away from the Duchess? He smiled again. It was like a moment of sunshine cutting through the clouds on a cold day. I would make you very happy, very comfortable here. For a moment her heart beat as fast as green honeybird's wings, to think of spending her days in the company of this handsome, soft-spoken man. But then she remembered little Saracina, how her tiny hand would curl around Jeza's finger like a baby monkey on a high branch might clutch its mother's tail, sure of that one thing only. I fear I cannot come to work here, my lord. Not to work. I owe my lady too much. And her baby. I am the nurse, you see. I could not leave her. He shook his head, not sternly, but only regretfully. Ah, too bad. But I admire your loyalty. I wish all of the dukes and the duchess's allies and servants were so mindful of their duty. He extended the roll of parchment. Here, take this back to your dear mistress. I have kept you away from your duties long enough. She did. This time it was something warmed by Viscount Matreyu's hands that she slid into the bosom of her dress, its length pressing against her chest so that she found it suddenly difficult to breathe. You are a very kind man, my lord. I only wish it were true. He saw that she hesitated. I'm sorry. Have I forgotten something? She was ashamed to say it, but a stern little voice inside her would not let Jeza stay silent. I am sorry, my good lord, but I must have the letter of my duchess back too. For a moment he looked surprised and perhaps just a tiny bit annoyed, but his features quickly relaxed. Of course, the duchess cannot be too careful. She has chosen her messenger well. He returned to his writing desk and picked up the message Jeza had brought, then handed it to her. Take good care of both. Go straight back to the Sansalon and let no one distract you. She wondered more than ever now what might be in the parchments, but even though the letter her mistress had written was now unsealed, she did not dream of reading it, and not only because she still had trouble with written Nabani. She wrapped the old letter around the new, then returned both to the bosom of her dress. I will, my lord, was all she said. As the servant arrived to show her out, Matreyu took her hand and kissed it. Kissed it, as though she were a high-born lady like her mistress. Farewell, Jeza. You are one messenger who is always welcome in my house. And if you should ever change your mind about the thing we discussed. The servant, a thin, pale old man, was watching them. She thought she saw a little sneer of contempt curl his lip. You are most kind, Lord Viscount, she said loudly enough for him to hear. Most kind and courteous to me, but my mistress needs me. Of course, and I am glad she has you. Go in God's grace, Jeza of the Rhine. She was so taken by the memory of the Viscount kissing her hand that she was halfway back down the Avenue of the Saints before she remembered where she was. And that's the end of that section, so that's going to be where we ended up for the night. And the comments part is still just spinning, but somewhere else it says James and Cliff Winnig and others. So I apologize for not being able to say hello to people in the way that I like to, but that's what happens when you're dealing with today's modern information society, where everything is much easier than it used to be. and paper is pointless because digital's better. And technology is always good, and all that stuff. No, I'm just frustrated. I get frustrated with the interface, and I get frustrated with Facebook. But I'm glad that there's any way in which I can do this, and that I can communicate with all of you in this fairly low stress way. So all that being said, despite the fact that I can't read any comments or anything else, I will say goodbye. I will be back at 7 p.m. later today to read some more, starting with the section after Jeza's meeting with Viscount Maitreyu. And until that time comes, or until next week, if I don't get to talk to you personally until then, take good care of yourselves. Very important first step. Take good care of yourselves. Do your best to take good care of your friends and family. Help the people around you out as best you can. And we will all struggle through somehow. That is my promise. Anyway, thanks again. Pleasure to spend time with you. Peace, please, and good night, or good morning, whichever may be more appropriate for you.